Hey guys, you know the drill of these videos. After finishing the game, let's check its story, gameplay, graphics and music. Take a look at the timestamps if you wanna see something in specific. So what is the deal with Kuro no Kiseki, or Trails Through Daybreak? Let's discuss about its beginning and then their general executions. This game opens with a cinematic showing what's going to be the prime topic, as well as the two main protagonists, in this case Van, a Spriggan, who's catching on what's going on, and Agnés, who's looking for certain artifacts, not with the cops or bracers, but our Spriggan. That is how the next day Agnés ventures into the old town, looking for outright solutions. Once Agnés explains what is the job going to be, Van takes the story as looking for an antique with muddy story in between, as it was stolen. So he pretty much turns down Agnés, saying that she should go with the guild or bracers for these kind of jobs. However, she doesn't want to desist that easily, and there is a dumb twist where Van has something of a sweet tooth. That is how he ends up accepting the job for the time being. And from there they go to the riverside, where we are going to find the biggest crime in this game, the biggest F. Shrimp and bean tacos, or chocolate rice tacos. Whomever came up with this is a freak. In all honesty, that person has no idea what a good taco de pastor is, o unas carnitas de esas bien pinches jugosas con unos tacos. Heck, I can even let us slide the stuff like Tex-Mex or the big child of the burrito on the sandwich that is sold in France. But this? Anyways, turning back to the story. Van and Agnés end up questioning a sketchy dude about the artifact that was stolen, but he doesn't spill the beans, forcing our duo to dive further. For their surprise, seems like they were not the only ones thinking in this, and that is how we can see why Van doesn't have the best of relationships with the cops. What a way to begin their day being interrogated. Despite this hardship, Agnés has her goal set in stone, stepping further into this mess, where they find the artifact and its weird powers, as it was able to bring two statues to life. However, things cannot be that easy, because a group of mafiosos is also looking for this orbment. However, Agnés tries to defend Van. They somehow activates the artifact, which gives life to Mare, the artificial intelligence from Van's Cypher. This is how he's able to transform into Grendel, and in this point we can stop, because if you know what is the background of Grendel, this story will make sense right away. And maybe why the main protagonist is named Van, but I won't spoil the story. So what is the main deal here? Through the tale we are going to find characters from all entries. Some of them make sense, some others not so much. But taking its story for what it is, as chapters pass, Van and Agnés will get into different situations looking for these artifacts, where other characters will join their cause. In general, if you ask me, I found Reset and Ferida as the most entertaining ones to read, because Ferida is a child that was pretty much grown on the battlefield, so she doesn't catch what are the slangs or stuff like that used in a normal life. In a sense, I believe she was inspired by Sagara Sosuke. As for Reset, I found her to be the character with the most interesting background. Then again, I won't spoil it. But returning to the general executions, I will say that the beginning of each chapter is rather slow. However, most of the time they have good conclusions, or things that redeem the drag in one way or another. Particularly I found interesting that they talked about some peculiar topics in a mature way. But it is fair to mention that if you're not a story-driven person, I recommend you to stay away from this series, because sometimes the only thing you will do is read. Literally in my case, after work, exercise, family, dinner, I have like 2 hours of gameplay, 2 hours reading. And what I definitely have to point out is that the translation is bad. If you know some Japanese, you will quickly catch what's going on. The thing is that I cannot read it, but I understand some of it well spoken. Nonetheless, these games have like 40% of voice acting, so everything else is played with BS stuff. And I say it like that because I wanna know what the story says, not what the translators think what I wanna read. Despite that, and some side reads in between, I will give this story an 8.5. The truth is that I found the tale interesting and intriguing, despite its localization, and throwing a lot of the soup later, and literally in the last chapter. Then again, if you know about Grendel Smith, you will quickly catch where's this whole mess pointing to. Its gameplay could be divided in multiple parts: dungeons, /combat, customization, and the general flow of the game. The dungeons are on the simple side, as they are pretty much straight lines, similar to other entries, where they added some basic action elements, depending from the leader you're using, where you can fill a gauge by constantly hitting or avoiding in the right moment the enemies. Once it is filled, you can unleash an attack that deals a decent amount of damage, and once you have hit them several times, it is possible to stun them, so you can release the shards to begin the classic turn-based system, where each party member has a role within the team, and the most basic ones are Van and Agnés, a frontline and a healer/mage. Whereas you advance, you will have the chance to equip on better weapons, submodules, armor, if that makes sense, and accessories. And from here, we can specialize each character with quartz. At first they are not that impressive, but as you advance, better quartz will be found in multiple ways, having different attributes that will help depending if you wanna go for offense, defense, magic, or extra stuff, because depending on the final number you get while unlocking and allocating these quartz slots, you will have unique bonuses. For a normal playthrough, you can mess with this till the very end of the game, aside perhaps from the last boss. If you wanna have a decent idea of what to do, you can check how some side characters have their quartz allocated. Of course, we are not done here, because we can also set different holos, which dictate the kind of magics we can use. Some of them focus on basic stuff, but as you advance, they have specific functions, so it is important to check each role and balance the team. But don't worry that much, its gameplay is for the most part balanced. Probably at the beginning you will see some game overs, but nothing that pushes you to farm unless you are brute forcing your way a bit too much with some mechs. If you have experience from previous entries, these kind of things don't happen that much, so don't worry. The general flow of the game is more or less like do some run around the city completing some subquests that you cannot really avoid, so let's say if you have 4 of them, the game forces you to do at least 3, where they are really random in nature. Sometimes you go up and down, or sometimes you need to beat a monster. However, if you ask me, I don't know, out of like 50 subquests, I remember like 5-7 of them. In game experience they don't make that much sense, and they feel like a kinda meh. However, in game setting they make sense, because most of them are related to stalking, looking for peculiar people, or doing sketchy things. But I cannot defend the fact that this is where you will feel bored, because not satisfied with morning side quest, after you finish that, the game throws some night side quest. Don't get me wrong, they are entertaining in their own way, but for a long journey I would have liked to have less of them, like in the last chapters where sometimes you have to do 2 of them and that's it. Now, I cannot really say how they impact your gameplay, but it states that depending from your alignment you won't be able to take on some quests later. As I did all of them, I believe I wasn't forced out of the possible options, where it matters the most once you reach the 5th chapter. But don't worry that much, despite all your efforts, there is a particular scene that you won't be able to see, because you cannot push these alignments further in your first playthrough. I know, it's not the best considering that this is a long game, but in overall I will give it an 8.5. Its gameplay is entertaining in many ways, and it has good level of customization. Graphically speaking, this is perhaps the weakest point, because Falcom has used the same engine a good chunk of time, so you will see the same issues as previous games. Also consider that they are not a AAA studio, so repainted enemies are really common. In this review I am showing the Switch version, and something that I like a lot is that it never froze or had issues. However, sometimes textures or NPCs around some scenes take a bit of time to load, the same with loading screens. I come from an era where they took a shitload of time, but yeah, sometimes they can go up to 1 minute, so not sure most people will stand that. But you can always go for the PS4, PS5 version of the game. Other issues worth mentioning is that you can glitch the game in dumb ways by getting stuck between some doors and objects, as they become immobile, so be careful around those things. And while diving into the dungeons, it is easy to see monsters humping against each other, which is definitely fun. And that was pretty much about it. A cool thing to point out is that they improved the some combat scenes a lot, at least in comparison with previous entries where they were a bit painful to watch. So yeah, in comparison some of these cinematics were extraordinary. I would have liked to see more of them, but it is fine. In general, I will say that the game is lively enough to give it a better score compared to the previous entries, so an 8 seems fair enough. And last but not least, its music. Kuro no Kiseki is filled with good melodies, having almost 100 tracks, going for around 3 hours and a half. But let's break things down, because their general execution is amazing. I could go on my normal days listening to several tracks like Cloudy Cloudy, Mechanical Syndrome, Unreasonable Beast, Satisfied Madness, and so on. But once I place them into the game, this is where I will suggest increasing their length, because as I explained, you will be a good chunk of time reading, unless you decide to skip on stuff. And for tracks that go for around 2 minutes or in the best case scenarios up to 3, they will be repeated a lot of times, unfortunately turning the experience stagnant. So it is fair to say that they have room to improve on different fronts. If I compare it with Trails in the Sky or the first Trails of Cold Steel, I enjoy those soundtracks much more. They balance the length, composition, and other elements a bit more. So I wouldn't mind if they reduce the number of tracks to, let's say, 30, 40, as soon as they have lengthier compositions to help the kind of setting they usually aim for. Aside from that, I enjoy it a lot. I will give it a 9. Falcom has a good chunk of experience with multiple genres, so I believe it is worth checking its soundtrack out. Trails Through Daybreak final score is an 8.5. It has room to improve into something better, because there are things that take a lot of time, but that don't really increase on the quality of the product. However, putting those things aside, it was an enjoyable story with a great cast of characters, and a good balance between serious and dumb moments, along a gameplay that doesn't turn tedious because you can play however you like, keeping things into pure action or turn-based stuff, of course with the main dish having a nice level of customization. This accompanied of better executions in their graphics, which is something appreciated, despite using the same engine. Now add an OST reminiscent to the classic Falcom journey and you have a really good JRPG experience. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.